A freezing January morning in 1940. War clouds are gathering over England. The Luftwaffe is sending hundreds of bombers every day to bring Britain to its knees. RAF pilots are at the point of exhaustion, and at this very moment, history's most unexpected heroes take the stage. 8 women, yes, you heard that right, 8 female pilots volunteer for missions that even men didn't dare to attempt. They would be called the Attagirls, and these women would take to the skies to change the fate of World War II. This video tells an epic story left to be forgotten in the dusty pages of history. If this story moves you as much as it moved me, please subscribe and don't forget to hit the like button, because the story of these women is a tale of heroism that every generation should know. If you've subscribed, let's dive right into this story. Now, let's go back to 1939. Europe is burning. As Hitler's armies trample across continental Europe, England feels alone and defenseless. The RAF needs aircraft. Hundreds of Spitfires, Hurricanes, and bombers are being produced from factories every day. But there's a problem. Who will fly these aircraft from the factories to the front lines? Combat pilots are fighting at the front. Pulling them back for aircraft transport would be a fatal mistake. And at this critical moment, one woman's vision changes everything. Pauline Gower. Born in 1910, this Englishwoman had obtained her pilot's license by the age of 20. In the pre-war years, she had toured the country with air circuses, taking over 33,000 passengers into the sky. But Pauline had a much bigger plan in mind. In November 1939, Pauline presented a bold proposal to the government, creating a unit where female pilots could transport military aircraft from factories to bases. The reactions were harsh. Some officials called the idea revolting and dangerous. One aviation magazine wrote, "The real danger is a woman whose intelligence is insufficient to scrub a hospital floor properly, thinking she should fly a high-speed bomber." But Pauline didn't give up. The urgent needs of war overcame prejudice. And on January 1, 1940, 8 female pilots were officially accepted into the women's section of the Air Transport Auxiliary. These women, who would be known as the First 8, were Joan Hughes, Margaret Cunnison, Mona Friedlander, Rosemary Reese, Marion Wilberforce, Margaret Fairweather, Gabrielle Patterson, and Winifred Crossley Fair. What did these women have in common? Each had at least 600 hours of flight experience. Some were flight instructors, others were record-breaking aviators. Joan Hughes was Britain's youngest female pilot, having earned her license at 17. Mona Friedlander was a national ice hockey team player. Initially, they were only permitted to fly light training aircraft like the Tiger Moth. While their male colleagues soared through the skies in Hurricanes and Spitfires, the women had to fly in open cockpits in freezing cold. But these women didn't complain. They knew one thing: England needed them. And this is where Amy Johnson enters the stage. Amy Johnson had gained worldwide fame in 1930 as the first woman to fly solo from England to Australia. 11,000 miles, 19 and a half days. This flight had turned her into a legend. When war broke out, Amy didn't hesitate to join the ATA. For an experienced pilot like hers, this was the most honorable way to serve her country. January 5, 1941. Snow is falling. Visibility is nearly zero. Amy is assigned to deliver an Airspeed Oxford aircraft from Blackpool to RAF Kidlington near Oxford. Ground control tells her not to take off. Weather conditions are too dangerous. But Amy insists. "I can find my way to Kidlington by following my nose," she says. 5 hours later, at the mouth of the Thames River, a convoy crew sees a parachute descending from the sky. A woman's voice is heard. "Hurry, please hurry." Captain Walter Fletcher of HMS Haslemere jumps into the freezing waters in a rescue attempt, but the current is too strong, the water ice cold. Amy Johnson's body was never found. This tragedy did not discourage the ATA women. On the contrary, Amy's sacrifice inspired them. Pauline Gower defended Amy to the press. She took off from northern England in bad weather because she knew another assignment was waiting for her. She lost her way in the clouds and ran out of fuel. As bad luck would have it, she ended up over water. As the war progressed, the responsibilities given to female pilots also increased. July 19, 1941 became a historic day. For the first time, 4 female pilots were given permission to fly Hurricanes: Winnie Crossley, Margaret Fairweather, Joan Hughes, and Rosemary Reese. This test flight went perfectly. In August, Spitfires were also open to women.
Spitfire. Even the name of this aircraft makes hearts race. This masterpiece, designed by R.J. Mitchell, was the symbol of the Battle of Britain. And now women were flying this legendary aircraft too. However, the challenges female pilots faced weren't just technical. They also had to fight against social prejudice. Once, Mary Ellis delivered a Wellington bomber to an RAF base. When she got out of the aircraft, the ground crew ignored her. "We're waiting for the pilot," they said. When Mary said, "I am the pilot," they didn't believe her. They searched the entire aircraft from front to back as if Mary was hiding a male pilot somewhere. This story played out again and again. Women had to prove their abilities every day, but they never gave up because they knew freedom would be won in the sky. The ATA's working conditions were incredibly demanding. Pilots worked 13 consecutive days and could only take 2 days off. They could fly 6 different types of aircraft in a single day. They might deliver a Tiger Moth in the morning, a Wellington bomber in the afternoon, and a Spitfire in the evening. And the most critical point was this: no radio, no navigation equipment, just a map, a compass, and a stopwatch. They were forbidden from entering clouds. They always had to maintain visual contact with the ground. Consider how changeable English weather is. One moment sunny, the next minute fog, rain, snow. Under these conditions, finding your way with only a map and compass required extraordinary skill. This is why they were called the forgotten pilots, the invisible heroes of war. Women and men behind the front lines, quietly risking their lives to deliver aircraft. 1943 became a turning point for ATA women. Pauline Gower achieved a historic success after long negotiations with the government. Equal pay. Yes, in an institution controlled by the British government, men and women would receive the same pay for the same work for the first time. This was a first in British history. The Equal Pay Act wouldn't pass until 30 years later, in 1970. The ATA women were far ahead of their time. That same year, female pilots were given permission to fly 4-engine heavy bombers. Lancaster, Halifax, Stirling, Flying Fortress. These massive machines normally required a 5-person crew, but the ATA women flew them solo. The first female 4-engine bomber pilot was Lettice Curtis. In October 1942, when U.S. First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt visited White Wallam, Lettice was introduced to her. By that point, Lettice had flown 90 different types of aircraft. By the end of the war, she would deliver over 400 heavy bombers, 150 Mosquitoes, and hundreds of Hurricanes and Spitfires. There's an anecdote about Lettice Curtis. From July 1940 to September 1945, for 62 months, she flew continuously, working 13 days and taking 2 days off. In all kinds of weather, under all conditions. This required incredible endurance. If you're enjoying this story, subscribe and like. The dangers ATA pilots faced were real. Throughout the war, 174 ATA pilots lost their lives. The rate for women was the same as for men, approximately 10%. 15 female pilots died on duty. Among them were Amy Johnson, Margaret Fairweather, Joy Davidson, Jane Winstone, and many others. The danger didn't just come from weather conditions. Barrage balloons were deployed to protect cities against low-altitude attacks. The steel cables holding these balloons posed a deadly threat to ATA pilots. When sirens sounded, the balloons rose. But pilots in the air received no warning. They had no radios. No one could alert them. There was also the risk of encountering enemy aircraft. Initially, ATA aircraft were transported with their weapons unloaded, but after several attacks, the weapons were kept loaded. Still, ATA pilots weren't trained for combat. Encountering a German fighter usually meant death. Despite all this, the women continued to fly, because they knew every Spitfire could save a life at the front. Every bomber could shorten the war by one more day. We've reached the end of this first part, but the story is just beginning. In the second part, we'll tell the incredible adventures of Diana Barnato Walker, Mary Ellis's Legend of 1,000 Aircraft, and the story of Sisters Joy and Yvonne Loftus, who started flying without ever having flown before. Each of these women is a legend in her own right. If this story has captured your interest, please subscribe to the channel. Because history isn't just written in books. History is the epic tales that brave people write in the sky.
Welcome back to the second part. We're continuing our story without slowing down. In the first part, we covered how the ATA was founded, Pauline Gower's vision, and Amy Johnson's tragic end. Now we'll dive into the individual stories of these extraordinary women. Each one is a separate epic. Each one is a tale of heroism. But first, let me say this. If this content adds value to your life, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support is crucial for these stories to reach more people. Now, let's start with Diana Barnato Walker. Born on January 15, 1918, during a Zeppelin raid on London, Diana Barnato was quite literally born into war. Her father, Wolf Barnato, was a famous racing driver who had won Le Mans 3 times in a row. Her grandfather, Barney Barnato, was one of South Africa's wealthiest diamond miners and a founder of De Beers. Diana was a socialite born with a silver spoon. In 1936, at 18 years old, Diana was presented to King Edward VIII at Buckingham Palace. She was a fixture at London's most glamorous balls. She was a regular at the Embassy Club and the 400 Club. At 21, her father gave her a Bentley as a gift. But Diana's eyes were elsewhere. In 1938, she took her first flying lesson at Brooklyn's Flying Club. After only 6 hours of training, she flew solo. This was extraordinary talent. When war broke out, Diana first served as a Red Cross nurse in France. After the Dunkirk evacuation, she returned to England and drove ambulances during the London Blitz. But she knew she belonged in the sky. On March 9, 1941, she applied to the ATA and was accepted. She began training in November 1941 and was assigned to number 15 Ferry Pool at Hamble, near Southampton, in May 1942. This was one of 2 all-female bases. Throughout the war, Diana flew 80 different types of aircraft and delivered 260 Spitfires. Once, in September 1944, she delivered 33 aircraft of 14 different types in a single month. This was an incredible performance. But Diana's story wasn't just about numbers. She was a brave and colorful woman who loved enjoying life. One day, while flying a Spitfire, she wanted to try some acrobatics. She flipped the aircraft upside down, but couldn't right it. While flying inverted, her silver compact fell out of her pocket and started rolling around the cockpit like crazy. Diana couldn't help laughing when she saw powder everywhere. In 1942, Diana fell in love. The man before her was Battle of Britain hero, squadron leader Humphrey Gilbert. When she was forced to make an emergency landing at RAF Debden due to bad weather, Humphrey met her. According to the story, he had the spark plugs removed from Diana's aircraft so she would stay for dinner. Within 3 weeks, they were engaged. But fate was cruel. Just 3 days after their engagement, Diana was flying a Tiger Moth over Debden. She couldn't see Humphrey's blue-nosed Spitfire. She made frantic phone calls. And she learned. Humphrey had lost his life in a flying accident the day before, on May 2, 1942. He was only 23 years old. Was Diana devastated? Yes. Did she stop flying? No, she continued to fly, because for her, flying wasn't just a duty, flying was freedom.
In 1944, Diana married Wing Commander Derek Walker. They couldn't get leave for a honeymoon, but they found a way. They both jumped into Spitfires and flew to Brussels. Officially, it was a reconnaissance mission, but everyone knew what it really was. This unauthorized flight cost them both 3 months' pay, but it went down in history as one of the most romantic honeymoons ever. Just a few months after the war, in November 1945, Derek Walker lost his life in bad weather while flying a Mustang. Diana was a widow once again. Diana Barnato Walker swore she would never marry again, but she never stopped flying. In 1963, at 45 years old, she broke the sound barrier in an RAF Lightning jet fighter, Mach 1.65, or 1,262 miles per hour. She became the first British woman to break the sound barrier. At 88 years old, she sat in a Spitfire cockpit one last time. It would have been a shame not to, she said. Diana Barnato Walker passed away in 2008 at 90 years old. But her legacy will live forever. For this valuable story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now let's move on to another legend, Mary Ellis. Mary Wilkins was born in 1917 in Leaffield, Oxfordshire, as the daughter of a farming family. When she was 8 years old, Sir Alan Cobham's flying circus came to her village and Mary convinced her father to pay for a flight. That moment changed her life.
At 16, she began taking flying lessons. When war broke out in 1939, all civilian flights were banned. Mary thought she would never fly again. But in 1941, she heard an announcement on the radio. The ATA was looking for pilots. She joined the ATA in October 1941 and was assigned to the women's pool at Hamble. Throughout the war, she delivered 1,000 aircraft of 76 different types to 210 different airfields. She flew 403 Spitfires. One of Mary's favorite anecdotes goes like this. One day, she delivered a Wellington bomber to an RAF base. The Wellington was a massive aircraft that normally required a 5-person crew. Mary made a perfect landing and got out of the aircraft. The ground crew ignored her. "We're waiting for the pilot," they said. Mary said, "I am the pilot." They didn't believe her. They went inside the aircraft and searched it from front to back, as if Mary was hiding a male pilot somewhere inside. Everyone was stunned, Mary would recall. They couldn't believe that a little girl like me could fly these huge aircraft all by herself. After the war, Mary Ellis became the manager of Sandown Airport on the Isle of Wight. In 1961, she married pilot Don Ellis, and they lived in a house right next to the runway. In 2017, at 100 years old, she took to the skies in a Spitfire. She proudly reminded everyone that she was older than the RAF itself. Mary Ellis passed away in 2018 at 101 years old. She remained in love with the sky until her last breath. Now I want to tell a different story. The story of the Lofthouse sisters, Joy and Yvonne. 1943. In Cirencester, Gloucestershire, 20-year-old Joy Goff was working as a cashier at Lloyd's Bank. One day, she saw an advertisement in Aeroplane magazine, ATA accepting applications to train pilots from scratch. Joy had no flying experience. She didn't even drive a car. But she applied. And surprisingly, her older sister Yvonne had also applied to the same advertisement. Neither knew about the other. Out of 2,000 applications, only 17 people were accepted, and 2 of those 17 were the Goff sisters. Yvonne's story was particularly tragic. Her husband, Tom Wheatley, was an RAF bomber pilot who had lost his life on a mission over Berlin. Yvonne didn't turn her anger at the war into revenge. Instead, she chose to continue where her husband had left off. The sisters learned to fly at the training school in Tame, from scratch. They had never even been inside an aircraft before, but their athletic background, especially playing tennis, had given them excellent coordination skills. Throughout the war, Joy flew 38 different types of aircraft: Spitfire, Hurricane, Mustang, Tempest.
She served at the women's pool at Hamble. Joy's strongest memory was from before D-Day. In June 1944, southern England was filled with military vehicles. Hundreds of ships and barges were lined up in the Solent. Joy saw this sight while flying her Spitfire. Preparations were being made for the largest amphibious landing in history. Everyone knew a terrible day was coming, but we also knew it had to happen for the war to end. In 2015, at 92 years old, Joy Lofthouse flew a Spitfire once more. She took the controls for 30 minutes. The sound of the Merlin engine was the same. The smell of the cockpit was the same. It was as if she had gone back 70 years. Joy Lofthouse passed away in 2017 at 94 years old. She had been applauded in the Royal Box at Wimbledon and honored at the Festival of Remembrance at the Royal Albert Hall. She was one of the last representatives of the Spitfire girls. Now, let's talk about international pilots. The ATA wasn't made up of just British women. Pilots from 28 different countries joined. And among these women, one of the most remarkable was Maureen Dunlop from Argentina. Maureen Dunlop was born in 1920 in Quilmes near Buenos Aires. Her father was an Australian who managed 250,000 hectares of sheep farms in Patagonia. Maureen grew up among horses and aircraft. When she came to England for a holiday in 1936, she took her first flying lessons. When war broke out, Maureen decided to help England. But to join the ATA, women needed at least 500 hours of solo flight experience. This was twice the 250 hours required for men. Maureen accumulated her hours and crossed the Atlantic with her sister in 1942 on a neutral Argentine ship. While her sister joined the BBC, Maureen applied to the ATA. She was accepted in April 1942. She trained to fly 38 different types of aircraft: Spitfire, Mustang, Typhoon, Wellington. Her favorite aircraft was the de Havilland Mosquito.
One day, a photograph of Maureen appeared on the cover of Picture Post magazine. It was taken as she was getting out of a Ferry Barracuda aircraft. 24 years old, tall, elegant. This image shook England. It proved that women were not just equal but powerful individuals. Maureen had to make several emergency landings. Once, her Spitfire's cockpit canopy blew off right after takeoff. Another time, her Argus aircraft's engine failed in midair, and she had to land in a field. After the war, she returned to Argentina and worked as a flight instructor and commercial pilot. She even flew for the Argentine Air Force. In 2003, together with Lettice Curtis and Barnato Walker, she received the Master Air Pilot Award, the most prestigious award of the Guild of Air Pilots and Air Navigators. Maureen Dunlop de Pop passed away in 2012 at 91 years old at her home in Norfolk. And now, let's move on to perhaps one of the most impressive stories, Lettice Curtis. Lettice Curtis was born in 1915 in Devon. She studied mathematics at Oxford University and was captain of the women's tennis and fencing teams. She learned to fly in 1937. In 1938, she obtained her commercial pilot's license and did aerial photography for the Ordnance Survey. In June 1940, she received a letter from the ATA. Pauline Gower was inviting her. Lettice accepted and became one of the ATA's most successful pilots. Lettice Curtis was the first woman to train to fly four-engine heavy bombers. In October 1942, when U.S. First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt and Winston Churchill's wife, Clementine Churchill, visited White Waltham, Lettice was introduced to them. She was standing under the wing of a Halifax bomber in the rain. The press announced the news with headlines like, "Mrs. Roosevelt meets Halifax girl pilot." In 1944, Lettice became the first female pilot to deliver a Lancaster bomber. This Lancaster ED-817/G would be used just a few days later by 617 Squadron in the famous Dam Busters raid on the Eder, Moan, and Sorpe dams. Throughout the war, Lettice delivered over 400 heavy bombers, 150 Mosquitoes, and hundreds of Spitfires and Hurricanes. For 62 months, she flew continuously, working 13 days and taking 2 days off, from July 1940
to September 1945. This required incredible endurance. Lettice had one particular distinction. The RAF Medical Board had assessed her as too nervous to be a pilot at her first examination, but Lettice shattered this prejudice by flying the war's most complex aircraft under the most challenging conditions. After the war, Lettice worked at the Military Aircraft Test Center at Boscombe Down, then became a senior flight development engineer at Fairey Aviation. In 1971, she wrote the book The Forgotten Pilots. This book brought the story of the ATA to the world. In 1992, at 77 years old, she obtained her helicopter pilot's license. In 1995, at 80 years old, she voluntarily stopped flying. Lettice Curtis passed away in 2014 at 99 years old. She remained an advocate for aviation until her final years. There's one more woman I can't pass without mentioning, Jackie Moggridge. Dolores Teresa Soror was born in 1922 in Pretoria, South Africa, but everyone knew her as Jackie. She got this nickname from a hockey player she admired, Jackie Rissick. At 14, she took her first flight and was completely enchanted. At 15, she began taking flight lessons. At 17, she became the first woman to parachute jump in South Africa. In 1938, she came to England and began training for her commercial pilot's license at the Aviation College in Oxford. When war broke out, she applied to the RAF. The answer? We don't accept female pilots. Jackie joined the WAAF, the Women's Auxiliary Air Force. They looked at her qualifications and made her a cook. Jackie was a terrible cook. She soon transferred to radar training. She watched the Battle of Britain on a radar screen as tiny dots. In 1940, she was invited to the ATA by Pauline Gower. She was the youngest female pilot at that time. Throughout the war, she delivered over 1,500 aircraft of 83 different types. Jackie has a romantic story. At a party, she met Engineer Captain Reg Moggridge. Jackie was shy and had hidden behind a curtain. Reg found her. Jackie would say he looked like a Greek god. Reg wanted to get engaged before being sent to India. They married in 1945.
One day while Jackie was passing over Aylesbury on a flight, she dropped a gift to the town where Reg was stationed, a love letter tied to a 2-ounce ration of chocolate. She attached a note asking whoever found it to keep the chocolate but deliver the letter to Reg Moggridge. After the war, Jackie wanted to continue flying. In 1949, she joined the RAF Volunteer Reserve and became the second woman to earn full RAF wings in 1953. In the 1950s, she ferried Spitfires from Cyprus to Burma and to the Indian Air Force. In 1958, she applied to Channel Airways as a pilot. She didn't indicate her gender on the application form. Thanks to her impressive flight history, she was hired and became Britain's first female airline captain on scheduled passenger flights. She flew routes to the Isle of Wight, Jersey, and Guernsey. But there was a problem. She was forbidden from speaking on the microphone to passengers. Why? Passengers might get nervous hearing a woman's voice. Jackie would respond to this with laughter. When accepting the Jean Lennox Bird Cup in 1959, she said, "I look forward to the day when it won't be considered unusual for a woman to be a captain." Jackie Moggridge passed away in 2004 at 81 years old. Her ashes were scattered over the Somerset sky from ML 407, a Spitfire she had delivered during the war. I should also describe what daily life was like for ATA pilots. Every morning, delivery chits were handed out at the ferry pools. A pilot would learn which aircraft they would deliver that day and from where to where. Flying 6 different types of aircraft in a single day was common. A Tiger Moth in the morning, a Wellington bomber in the afternoon, a Spitfire in the evening. So how did they fly aircraft they had never flown before? This is where the ferry pilot's notes came in, a pocket-sized booklet. Inside were basic information for 150 different aircraft types: stall speed, landing speed, fuel capacity, cockpit layout, a few pages of life-saving information. There's a story Jackie Moggridge told. One day, she was giving a soldier in an aircraft she had never seen before. The weather was terrible.
The soldier saw Jackie holding a book in her lap and complained. After landing, the commander asked, "How was the flight?" The soldier said, "In terrible weather, the female pilot was reading a novel." Jackie explained, "It wasn't a novel, it was my ATA notes. I had never flown this aircraft before." The man nearly fainted. This was the reality of ATA pilots. Every day a new aircraft, every day a new adventure, every day a new risk. No radio, entering clouds was forbidden. Navigation? A map, a compass, and a stopwatch. English weather? Could change at any moment. 1 minute sunshine, the next minute fog. And the dangers? Barrage balloons and their steel cables, enemy aircraft, aircraft fresh from the factory, not yet tested, damaged wrecks being transported for graveyard duty. 174 ATA pilots lost their lives during the war. The rate for women was the same as for men. Approximately 10%, 15 female pilots died on duty. But these women got up every day and flew. Because England needed them. Because freedom would be won in the sky. In 1943, a historic development occurred. Pauline Gower won the right to equal pay after long negotiations with the government. Female and male pilots doing the same job would now receive the same salary. This was a first in any institution controlled by the British government. The Equal Pay Act wouldn't pass until 1970. The ATA women were 27 years ahead of their time. Lord Beaverbrook said at the ATA's closing ceremony in 1945, "Without the ATA, the days and nights of the Battle of Britain would have been conducted under very different conditions. They kept countless pilots ready for battle by delivering aircraft from factories to the RAF. If the Battle of Britain was the RAF's success, the ATA was the force that supported and sustained them. They were soldiers who fought as if they were in the front lines." We've reached the end of this second part, but the story isn't over yet. In the third and final part, I'll tell you about these women's post-war lives, their legacy, and the last surviving Spitfire girl still alive today. And I'll show you why these women are heroes not just of England, but of the entire world. If this story has moved you, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Write in the comments which ATA pilot story affected you the most. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. See you in the third part.
Here we are at the final part. In the first 2 episodes, we told the story of how the ATA women conquered the skies during the darkest days of the war. We saw Diana Barnato Walker's courageous life, Mary Ellis's legend of 1,000 aircraft, Lettice Curtis's triumph with 4 engine bombers, and the Lofthouse sisters' rise from zero to pilots. Now we're moving on to the final act of this epic. The war is over. But for these women, the struggle was just beginning. But first, I want to thank you for watching this video all the way through. If this content has added value to your life, please subscribe and hit the like button. Your support is crucial for these stories to reach more people. Thank you. Now, let's go to November 30, 1945. That day, a historic ceremony was held at White Waltham Airfield. Lord Beaverbrook took the podium and spoke these words. Without the ATA, the days and nights of the Battle of Britain would have been conducted under very different conditions. They kept countless pilots ready for battle by delivering aircraft from factories to the RAF. If the Battle of Britain was the RAF's success, the ATA was the force that supported and sustained them. They were soldiers who fought as if they were in the front lines. With those words, the ATA was officially dissolved. An organization that had delivered 309,000 aircraft over 6 years, flown 147 different types of aircraft, and logged 415,000 hours in the air, vanished into history overnight. And the women pilots? They were forced to become housewives overnight. In the post-war world, traditional roles reasserted themselves. Men were returning from the front and needed jobs. Women were expected to withdraw from factories and cockpits and return to their kitchens. Airlines weren't hiring women pilots. The RAF certainly wasn't. There was no place for women in commercial aviation. Think about it.
These women had flown Spitfires, Hurricanes, Lancasters, Halifaxes, Mosquitoes. They had delivered 4-engine heavy bombers solo. But when the war ended, no airline wanted to hire them. In America, the situation was even worse. The first female commercial airline pilot wasn't hired until 1973. Frontier Airlines, Eastern, and American Airlines employed their first female pilots that year. A 30-year wait. In Britain, when Jackie Mongridge applied to Channel Airways in 1958, she didn't indicate her gender on the application form. Thanks to her impressive flight history, she was hired and became Britain's first female airline captain on scheduled passenger flights. But there was a condition. She was forbidden from speaking on the microphone to passengers. Why? Passengers might get nervous hearing a woman's voice. This was 1958. Women had flown Spitfires, but they couldn't say, "Have a good flight," to passengers. Nancy Stratford was one of the American ATA pilots. When she returned to Los Angeles after the war, she couldn't find work as a pilot. Jobs were given to men, not women. In 1947, she found a job at a small commercial aviation company in Oregon. She worked as a flight instructor, accountant, and crop duster. That same year, she got her helicopter license and became the 4th woman helicopter pilot in the world. In 1960, she and her husband Arlo Livingston moved to Juneau, Alaska, and founded Livingston Copters as the first female helicopter operator. For 18 years, they provided helicopter service across Alaska's rugged terrain. Among their passengers was Sir Edmund Hillary, one of the first people to climb Everest. Nancy flew him to Mendenhall Glacier in 1963. But the engine noise permanently damaged Nancy's hearing. In 1978, at 60 years old, she had to surrender her pilot license. 8,500 hours of flight, 105 different types of aircraft, and finally, silence. Nancy Stratford is 106 years old today. She lives in La Costa Glen Retirement Community in Carlsbad, California. Her apartment is filled with aviation memorabilia, photographs, model aircraft, albums from the war years, and that famous leather flight helmet with the names of 50 different types of aircraft she flew on it.
When she celebrated her 106th birthday in June 2025, she answered those who asked about the secret to a long life: chocolate and vodka tonic. Nancy Stratford is the last surviving woman ATA pilot, the last Attagirl, a living witness to history. 2008 became a long-awaited turning point for ATA pilots. The British government, after a 63-year delay, finally recognized them. In September 2008, Prime Minister Gordon Brown held a special ceremony at 10 Downing Street. He presented the ATA Veterans Badge to the surviving ATA pilots. More than 30 elderly heroes gathered on a rainy London day beneath the same skies they had flown 70 years before. Brown said, "We have medals for veterans of war. We have medals for those who served in the land army. I think there should be recognition for the Spitfire women pilots who did so much to protect and defend the Air Force and the other services." Member of Parliament Nigel Griffiths added, "Frankly, without the efforts of the ATA, the Luftwaffe could have crushed us." They had waited 68 years. 68 years! American pilot Betty Lucier said after the ceremony, "They only waited 68 years to recognize us." This delay shows how short social memory can be. But it also proves how important these women's stories are, because they didn't deserve to be forgotten. Never. Pauline Gower's story was perhaps the most tragic of all. The founder and commander of the Women's ATA section had fought for women's rights throughout the war, won equal pay, and paved the way for women pilots to fly heavy bombers. In 1943, she became the first woman appointed to the board of directors of the British Overseas Airways Corporation, BOAC. This was the first woman appointed to the board of a national airline in world history.
In the summer of 1945, she married Wing Commander Bill Fahey. More than 90 of the ATA women pilots signed a silver tray as a wedding gift. But happiness didn't last long. On March 2, 1947, Pauline gave birth to twin boys, and shortly after the birth, at 36 years old, she died of a heart attack. The pioneer of women's aviation left us without seeing her victory, but her legacy would live forever. The fate of her close friend and colleague, Dorothy Spicer, was also tragic. In December 1946, an Avro York passenger aircraft crashed into a mountain near Rio de Janeiro. Dorothy was on that plane. The two women had discovered aviation together. In 1931, they had started a joyride and air taxi service together in Kent. They had toured England together with flying circuses. And both lost their lives at a young age, the very lives that the sky had given them. But other ATA women lived on, and as they lived, they continued to push the boundaries of aviation. Diana Barnato Walker broke the sound barrier in 1963 at 45 years old in an RAF Lightning jet fighter. Mach 1.65, 1,262 miles per hour. She became the first British woman to break the sound barrier. She passed away in 2008 at 90 years old. But at 88, she had sat in a Spitfire cockpit one last time. Pauline Curtis wrote The Forgotten Pilots in 1971, bringing the story of the ATA to the world. In 1992, at 77 years old, she got her helicopter license. She passed away in 2014 at 99 years old. What did these women have in common? None of them ever stopped flying. They grew old, their hair turned white, their hands trembled, but their love for the sky never faded. The legacy of the ATA women wasn't limited to aviation. They were pioneers in the fight for women's rights. The equal pay they won in 1943 was a first in British history. The Equal Pay Act wouldn't pass until 1970. The ATA women were 27 years ahead of their time. They proved that women could do the same job as men with the same quality. Flying a Spitfire wasn't men's work. Delivering a Wellington bomber wasn't men's work. Flying a 4-engine Lancaster solo wasn't men's work. Flying well was about being a good pilot. Talent mattered, not gender.
Today, only 5% of airline pilots worldwide are women. That number is still very low. But 80 years ago, that number was 0. Every woman pilot rises on the shoulders of the ATA women. In 2019, EasyJet Airline launched a campaign honoring the ATA women. CEO Johan Lundgren took a 5% pay cut from his own salary to match it with his female predecessor's salary to encourage women pilots. Pilots visited over 100 schools to introduce young girls to aviation. They sponsored an aviation badge for the Girl Scouts. This was the spirit of the ATA women. They hadn't flown just for themselves. They had opened doors for future generations. Now let's ask a question. What made these women unforgettable? Their courage? Yes, absolutely. Flying without radio, without navigation equipment, in all kinds of weather took courage. Their skill? Yes. 147 different types of aircraft, women who went from zero to pilot, pilots who flew 4-engine bombers solo. Their sacrifice? Yes. 15 women lost their lives on duty. Amy Johnson disappeared in the icy waters of the Thames River. But I think what made them unforgettable was something deeper. They did what was called impossible. They were told women can't fly, and they flew. They were told women can't handle fighter planes, and they flew Spitfires. They were told women can't fly bombers, and they delivered Lancasters. At every step, every flight,
every landing, they sent a message. Limits exist only in the mind. This message still holds true today. Whatever field you're in, there will be voices telling you you can't do it. Social expectations, prejudices, fears. But the ATA women showed us that the only way to silence those voices is to do it. If you want to fly, fly. If you want to write, write. If you want to build, build. You draw the limits. In 2025, Becky Eichmann published Spitfires, the American women who flew in the face of danger during World War II. This book tells the stories of 25 American women ATA pilots. With Nancy Stratford's testimony, the courage of these women is being passed on to new generations. At the Maidenhead Heritage Center, you'll find the world's only ATA museum and archive. The Grandma Flew Spitfires exhibition keeps these women's stories alive. Visitors can experience the sky in a Spitfire simulator. At St. Paul's Cathedral, there is a special memorial dedicated to the 173 aviators who lost their lives in the ATA. Amy Johnson, Margaret Fairweather, Joy Davidson, and others are commemorated there. At White Waltham, Hamble, Ringway, Ratcliffe, and other former ATA bases, there are memorial plaques. These places are now quiet airports or commercial facilities, but the plaques on their walls remind us that history was once written here. And every year, on the anniversary of the Battle of Britain, Spitfires fly in the sky. The sound of Merlin engines honors the heroes from 80 years ago. Among those heroes are the Attagirls. As we come to the end of this video, I want to ask you something. While listening to this story, which woman's story affected you the most? Was it Diana Barnato Walker losing 2 fiancés yet continuing to fly? Was it Mary Ellis delivering 1,000 aircraft and saying, "I am the pilot," when she got out of the Wellington? Was it the Lofthouse sisters becoming pilots without ever having seen an aircraft? Was it Nancy Stratford still being alive at 106 years old? Write to me in the comments. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. And if this video inspired you, please like, subscribe, and share with those around you. These women's story doesn't deserve to be forgotten. Their legacy is our responsibility. In our next video, I'll tell another little-known story from World War II. Can you guess which story it will be? I'll give you a hint. This time, we're going beneath the seas. You're curious, aren't you? Then subscribe and turn on notifications. And finally, let's send a salute to the ATA women. Queens of the sky, eternal heroes. Your Spitfires fly forever. See you in the next videos. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye. Blue skies, ladies. Blue skies.